So again, the intent there is to try to get it to you, as Dan said, even though it doesn't say 10 days, it would be provided as soon as practical and without delay, and the definition pretty much by the State Attorney General is that's a 10-day limit, and most of your superintendents would know that. So that's the modification of that policy that hopefully accomplishes what you want to make sure that as a board member, when you request something, you have the right to it. If it's requested as an official for the board capacity as a local public official, again, no cost. We make sure that it happens. If for some reason there needs to be a delay, we let the board member know why that delay is happening. And in the meantime, the process continues. That's what I got from WASB in terms of trying to put something together. And certainly open to any questions, but that's your WASB recommendation on this policy.
It addresses the concerns that I had moving forward. So I'll make a motion that we approve the amendments that are provided here on policy 143 as stated.
Okay, so a motion by Kevin, is your second?
I'll second.
And a second by Mark. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry.
Again, with the next one on board member ethics, as we left the last meeting, even though our Neola representative had suggested that we probably couldn't go beyond what we currently had, the request was that we contact our own legal counsel. So I did ask Dean Dietrich to weigh in on this. It's a rather lengthy letter that pretty much says you can't do it. It was suggested. What I did do was include a small portion of his letter, which I'll read. It simply says, as you know, school board members are elected by the residents of the school district. Any effort to remove a school board member either from a particular meeting or from the position of school board member would require action by the residents of the school district who elected the board member to the position or by a circuit court judge. The only action that could be taken by a school board to address the conduct of an individual school board member would be a motion to censure the board member for particular conduct. A motion to censure a school board member results in either private or public action taken by the school board to censure the board member for noted conduct and have that motion documented in the official records of the school board or the school district. A review of state statutes, and again, I can probably bring to you much more of what Dean said, but he did go through the state statutes, and he summarized it by saying, a review of state statutes does not provide any other alternative for a school board to address the conduct of an individual school board member. That's pretty much what Steve Lavelle was sharing with you at the last board meeting. And now you've got it not only from Steve, but from your attorney, Dean Dietrich. Therefore, the language that you have in place right now is what really ought to stay, and things like professional conduct and the other suggestions that were there have all been struck. So again, I'm open to any questions, but it would seem like the language that you have is not open to any modification at this point. This is a policy that's currently in place.
So you don't need any action?
Is that correct, Amy? I believe this policy is one that we have that does not require any action, correct? From there, we jumped down to public participation in board meetings. And again, in this case, I spoke with another representative from WASB, Gary Forbes. Some of you may know him. Pretty much said what Corey said at the last board meeting: be careful of what you're asking for. It's not that other boards don't have policies that allow people to come in and speak on any school board matter, but he seemed to suggest that that creates many issues down the road. And I don't know if you call it a hard, fast recommendation, but school boards that have the language that you have, which I put back in green, an agenda item for that specific meeting, probably less troublesome than if you change it to a school matter. You can do either one, but Corey almost echoed your words. Be careful of what you ask for, because if you go down that path, I'm telling you, you're going to wonder, why did we go there?
So does this policy need action or
Well,
just?
it's just-
Well, it would have needed action if you wanted to go with school matter. If you simply want to leave it as an agenda item for that specific meeting, then it does not need action. If you want to change it to a school board, a school matter, then it requires action.
I agree with you, Mark.
So,
It's okay?
Board member?
Is there a quick, just a comment, if somebody comes from outside, do they have to be from the school district to talk?
Yes.
So if somebody from Austin wants this thing,
I suppose, I mean,
I mean, out
ideally,
there-
your policy, I think, says they're supposed to state their name and their address, and they should be a resident of the Mosinee School District, yes.
I wasn't
Could you
sure.
grant an exemption? I think boards have power, but, again, once you start going down that path.
Yeah, I didn't know,
Yeah.
I don't know what the reason was.
Typically, you have to be a member of the district to share your thoughts about what's happening in the district. And in this case, it's on an agenda item.
Well, the one thing that I contacted WASB about too is we were at two different meetings and one representative said when board members speak during public forum, that they really shouldn't do it because you're wearing two hats. But then another one said, well, you can do it. But they recommended that if a board member speaks, if we choose to speak during the public forum portion, we should be treated as such as a person in the public. So, something to watch for.
I mean, that's a clarification that there's this idea that board members can't speak as a part of the public session. You can, but ideally, you recuse yourself from being a board member. You get up and if there was a podium that's being used by the general public, wherever the public is speaking from, as you recuse yourself, you go over, you speak as a member of the public, and then when you're done, you come back and take your seat as a board member again. So you can speak, but try to separate the role. And here as a board member, I want to say something, so now I get up and I speak as a parent or as a individual.
Based on what you had said about being a Mosinee resident, I think if that's what the board feels for people that can speak publicly during public comment, we should have that in our policy, which I don't think we do. About because it says, anyone having a legitimate interest in an agenda item for that specific meeting may participate during the public portion of the meeting. So should it say, any Mosinee resident having a legitimate interest?
Any resident of Mosinee School District.
Sorry.
Right, right.
I'll second it.
I made a motion, is that what I did?
That's what I was thinking. It should be in there.
I mean, I can think of some of our board meetings where there was a contentious issue and we had people who were past Mosinee, they were Mosinee alumni but didn't live in our district anymore that showed up to speak and gave their piece. And it didn't create an issue, I'm just saying, if that's gonna be a rule, we should have that rule in our policies so you can, excuse me?
You wouldn't want alumni to come speak at something that might be,
What I'm saying is if we're gonna have a rule that says you have to be a Mosinee School District resident, then our rule should be in our policy, not just in our heads.
That's what most boards do require, is that you be a resident and you fill out a form, an actual form that's handed to the board president. You state your name, your address, and ideally that address falls within the boundaries of the Mosinee School District. Not a bad suggestion.
right? So we do have a motion and a second.
Okay, I made a motion.
I guess you did.
I'm fine with that, I'll make a motion to change
The language in
the
there.
language in section B, it says BI here on the computer, but B, to saying any resident of the Mosinee School District having a legitimate interest in an agenda item for that specific meeting may participate during the public portion of the meeting.
Okay,
Second.
okay. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
I know, I don't know if this is out of turn, but I know questions come up on this of employees who are not, I mean, we've had
We have a
employees
lot of
that speak
employees.
that are not residents of
Exactly.
Mosinee, but that work for the school district. I don't know if there needs to be, I've been asked that by some of our employees, you know, that live in Wassar Point, and I didn't have an
Under the
answer.
public participation part, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So the solution to that is to stick with the original language that says any, let me find it here again. Clicked the wrong button. Any, bear with me. lost it, where did it go?
Anyone having a legitimate interest.
Right, so
in an
then,
agenda.
so then you define legitimate interest.
Right,
And then the legitimate interest, you can define it as being a resident of the Mosinee School District, being an employee of the Mosinee School District, or being a therapy dog in the Mosinee School District.
Or a benefactor.
Well, then are we going down that path of, careful what you ask for?
As long as you have a clearly defined reason. And I would think you would want to give your employees the ability to address
right,
this body.
right.
Would you want to put it in there?
But then there's also, again, what if you have a child through open enrollment that is here, there, then that's another vested interest.
Sure.
So that's what I'm saying, we,
So what
You
you
have a
don't wanna
legitimate
do is,
interest.
what I'm hearing, we do not wanna say they have to be a Mosinee resident. We wanna leave it as is.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay.
I'm saying you leave that language, but you define what legitimately means. Still haven't found it.
Is there a language somewhere that we have that actually defines legitimate?
I never saw it.
Ask Steve, take
What's
it
that?
back, bring it back to Steve Levin. And just see what he can find something with
That would be
another
fine.
school district.
I'll rescind my motion, because I think this is really important.
Sure.
And if there's a way to define that so that this policy does what we need it to,
Sure. Sure. Sure, rescind your motion. Okay,
Is the board comfortable with an agenda item as opposed to a school matter?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm comfortable with it.
So we just need clarification on legitimate interest. We'll bring that in.
and bring it back.
Okay.
The assessment of district goals, this was one where I think there was some idea that perhaps there was conflicting dates and whatever that is. So I tried to do, take a look at what's going on around us. And in a review of other districts, rather than having more specifics, it seems like it's more open-ended. So what you have in front of you is, and I shared this with Jess earlier, I think that you were concerned about this. This is pretty much modeled after a number of districts close by. This is exactly what DC Everest has. And so what it says, it's in black, has established the following policy for effective assessment of the district's progress towards their realization. Now, again, the details have to be worked out, but in conjunction with its annual evaluation of the superintendent, the board shall also provide the time for both the board and the administration to assess the progress of the district during the previous year towards the achievement of current goals. You're going to be bringing in somebody brand new. Ideally, when this process happens, you and your new superintendent would sit down probably in late July or August, September at the latest, and say, here are the goals that we have. This is what we want to see accomplished in the school district during the 1920 school year. And then you start looking at where are you going to bring that superintendent back and how often do you want that person to report back to you in terms of how those things are happening. Some boards want to do it on a quarterly basis. Some boards simply want to do it during the superintendent's evaluation, which often occurs usually in November, December at the latest. Where at that point in time, you're about halfway through and you're starting to take a look at whether or not the goals you decided on back in August and September are happening. And then again, assuming the contract goes over, the superintendent's back with you. As you set goals for next year, you come back and you evaluate them again, perhaps in May or June. But it really leaves the flexibility for you to sit down with your new administrator and decide the process for establishing the goals and objectives, letting that superintendent know how they're going to be evaluated, how you want them to report back to you. So it's pretty open-ended. And then where it used to say the board shall, if this one says the board may develop and implement a plan to improve its own performance as the body charged with the responsibility for governing the district. You don't have to, but if you want to come up with your own plan, you can certainly do that. It doesn't require you to do that. But a lot of the districts that have sort of shortened this have that last one, which we may develop and implement a plan to look at board performance. evaluations. So that doesn't set that you're gonna do it this month, at this time, whatever it is. It opens that up, and you bring your new superintendent in, and you begin to talk about where you want to go. Have that conversation that this is where we're going to, what are the goals and objectives that you have? Are they going to be the same 6 for 1920 that we had for 1819? What is it that you want that person to be held accountable? And in the big picture, more and more with, I think, boards and administrators are coming together on not evaluating that person's personality as much as you're evaluating whether or not they accomplish the goals and objectives that you wanted them to accomplish. Set the goals in August and September, review them prior to making a decision about their contract, and then review it again sometime, say, May or June. Decide on how many reports you want to get to them along the way. So that doesn't give more, specifics, it gives you less, but again, what you see in black there is an exact copy of what DC Everest and many districts are using.
Is this,
Yep.
okay. So that's we're adding into the green, correct? What you
Yes.
were reading. So that's the addition too, so we would need a motion on that.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Matt and a second by Mark. Further discussion?
Just so I'm clear, all the stricken red would be removed and
Yes.
just the green would be installed.
Yes.
Correct. Any other questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry.
The one that deals with public information, what we're suggesting, I think Brent can perhaps comment on this. After our meeting, when we were talking about this, Brent shared that this issue had really already been addressed in the process, I think, of dealing with one of your bond attorneys. And the recommendation was to not, you don't really have to list or specifically designate a newspaper. And the language, and will utilize insofar as practical and all appropriate means of media to achieve this end. It really gives you flexibility in a smaller district here as to when you want to use perhaps the Wausau Times, what you want to put in the Mosinee newspaper. You don't have to designate, this gives you flexibility. So we're suggesting striking the red and leaving the green. And Brett, you know when this was discussed rather recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in regard to the gentleman saying that our energy efficiency project wasn't appropriate because we didn't publish it correctly. So that's when it came up.
As presented. Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Corey and a second by Matt. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The next two on there, the class size, we've been directed to hold that for the February board meeting, and the superintendent hold it until prior to hiring the superintendent, so those aren't up for discussion tonight.
Okay. All right, moving on to item 10, 9D, discussion of possible decision of the revision to the support staff handbook, section 4.7, other leaves.
Again, I'm going to ask Darlene to perhaps address this because it comes through human resources. I would share with you after the board gave us permission to research this topic. Darlene checked with lots of other districts, brought back sample language that the administrative team could look at. We spent a couple of weeks mulling over the language that you have is something that's endorsed by the administrative team. I'll let Darlene share with you, a little bit of the history behind when we came up with this language.
Yeah, our current language said that employees should be allowed 3 days off without pay for family-related matters, school activities, and school-related athletic activities, subject to the approval of the superintendent. The leave could not be used for vacation or recreation purposes. So it made it hard for employees who maybe had other jobs who come here and work here part-time. They only get 2 personal days per year if they work school year only. So, they didn't find this as, that they could take time off. So we asked if we could change it to employees should be allowed to take off days without pay for special circumstances once they have used or scheduled all their personal and vacation leave. Requests for leave must be submitted in writing to the Human Resources Director as soon as possible or 7 business days prior to the leave. And then we would look at it to see, you know, what are the circumstances of the leave, the availability of a substitute, and if the employee, you know, had problems with an attendance record. They still would have to take it in full or half-day increments. But we have employees that work 3 hours per day, and they want to go with their husband, you know, because he won an award and it's at a conference in Texas. And the current language that we have, you know, isn't friendly for that type of employee. We have secretaries who work school year only and have 2 personal days. So we're looking at changing this. We do not have a lot of employees that ask for leave without pay, but for those of them who would need this, it would be a way to keep our employees in the district working for us. A lot of them have full-time jobs, and when they take these housekeeping jobs, they're working 4 hours per day. The other job is allowing them 2 to 3 weeks occupation, and they have 2 personal days.
Steve, I think this is the flexibility that you were looking for, because I think your situation was, you were really being challenged with.
Yeah, you know, I have actually 12 part-time people, so, you know, they have full-time jobs, so they follow us all the time, but then they're gonna take their week vacation to go. So what do I say? You know, so I guess we're just looking for the flexibility to help these people.
I really struggle with the language for special circumstances, because that leaves it up to interpretation and what's a good reason for one person and not for another person. For the scenarios you're discussing, I want employees shall be allowed, and maybe you can separate it between our teaching staff. If-
Well, this is for support staff
This
only.
is support staff.
Okay, well then, just call it, employees shall be allowed to take off days without pay.
Pre-approved.
Well, it's approved, you know?
Pre-approved, not after the fact, before the fact.
I just, unless you're gonna define special circumstances somewhere and stick to that, I think you're better off just letting them take the days.
Well, I guess we don't want somebody coming to us, yeah, once a month saying, you know,
But you're allowing them 3 days a year, right?
no, well, we want to take away, we want to replace that 3 days with unlimited. You know, we are saying that they can take off days. We're not putting in 5 days or 6 days or 3 days. We had, conversation that I had was with Wausau School District, and they have a lot of support staff, and they said that they maybe have 10 employees a year. But they do use the special circumstances, just because they don't want an employee coming to them once a month. You know, I need 3 days off for a massage, therapy, someplace, you know. She said they want to have something with special circumstances so that it's just not for anything.
Sometimes you just need a massage.
Sometimes you might, but yeah.
I mean, I object to it unless you're gonna define special circumstances. If we have people in that situation that are working 4 hours a day for us, and they have an opportunity to go somewhere for a week and they need off and they talk to their boss and they're like, yeah, go.
And that would be special circumstance. If that is something, you know, you have a vacation to go for, I mean, we would allow it. If you want
Not
I
to,
think we're looking at,
Servitude.
we don't want our librarian every month go on a vacation for a week. Cause that could happen too.
Well, then limit it.
Yeah, you don't have to approve it.
no, correct. And we would look at the attendance record. If I saw something like that, I would say, well, you were off the last 3 months, you know, when we, I mean, no, we would not.
I think I understand where you're coming from, just from working and work at work. You know, you don't, it's very sometimes hard to replace these people. So if you're making them come forward and put in, to give an explanation and make sure you're covered, kind of making everybody happy.
This came to light as we have somebody that works 3 hours per day, does not need the job here, just does it for something to do and enjoys being by the kids. And she wants to take a week and go with her mom to Hawaii. If we're not going to allow it, she's gonna leave her position. But we're hearing more and more of it. I mean, I think we do need to do something to make our employees happy and, you know.
It certainly seems like the board is supporting the concept here. The question is whether you want us to leave special circumstances in or take it out.
I'm in favor of taking it out, just make it.
Your special circumstance there is a trip to Hawaii, and somebody else just might be going to a Packer game,
Yeah.
or
It's
do
pretty-
you guys really wanna be the ones deciding is it special enough? No, it's either okay or not okay.
Yeah, and there it turns into abuse. If there's a trend there, there's an abuse that's not meeting us halfway, and what good is it to us to retain that employment?
They're at-will employees, if they're not here enough to be effective, then find somebody else.
So do you want me to just, employees should be allowed to take off days without pay? Once they have used or scheduled all their personal and vacation leave, and just strike the word, for special circumstances?
How about with pre-approval?
There you go.
It states it later in the
Just-
paragraph, but I think maybe Matt mentioned that to her, someone did. Just so it's up front, I mean, you explain that it still has to be approved when they're on, but. Cause really, I mean, I'm sitting here going, whether you put special circumstances in there or not, you're still making the determination on whether it's special enough. We're still doing it, so whether it's in there or not, we're kinda still doing it,
She
you
is,
know?
but I think you might have more people just coming in for any little thing then. I
Yeah.
think that saying special circumstance is going to give them pause to think about it first. And if you're consulting with other school districts, HR departments, and that's the verbiage they're using, I would do that, but that's my opinion.
I like it as well, and I echo, just because I know sometimes it's hard to get people in
Yep.
to
Right
fill
now-
those spots.
Right now is a job seeker's market, so I know absolutely that you will struggle to fill these positions. So you gotta try to somewhat be accommodating, yet not let them be abusive if you have any people trying to abuse the situation.
And Wassa being as big as it is, they said they have less than 10 employees. We kind of looked at our situation, maybe 5 employees a year. So it's,
Now, when you read it, you said 7 business days, and that's not what's on the.
or
paper.
7 days prior to the beginning of the leave, just 7 days, just so they know they need to come to me ahead of time, not just come to me, oh, tomorrow, by the way, I need to be off 5 days. You know, I want them to stop and think and say, oh yeah, I have to give 7 days notice. I mean, if something comes up and it's an emergency, of course, we're going to, grant it if we can. It says as soon as possible, or 7
Okay,
days
so
prior
what
to
are
the
we,
beginning
what are
of
we
leave.
at?
Okay, this is the language primarily coming out of the Wausau School District that we're using to put something together here.
Yes, we do.
I make a motion to approve the amendment to the support staff employee handbook as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Jess, is there a second?
I'll second it.
And a second by Mark, further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I abstain.
I believe we have
Who
2
said no?
no's.
I'm a no.
3 no's.
3 no's?
Yeah, 3 no's and an
And one
abstention.
abstention.
So it's still 3, fine. So motion passed. Item 10, new business, update, discussion, and possible decision, teacher compensation Q1 2018-19 meeting, and in addition to Appendix G for Battle of the Books.
Again, I think Darlene's going to share the information that took place at the first of those quarter meetings, and also a request for approval of the Battle of the Books to Appendix G.
We did have our meeting, our first quarter meeting on November 7th. And Brady, if you just go down to the link, we did look at where we are compared, if you want to take the 17th to the 18-19 school year. We did look to see where our employees are. Can you link to that one, Brady? And what we can see is our employees are moving up the schedule like we thought they would by taking by completing professional development. What I can see in each one of these levels, we'll have 30 employees in level 1, and that actually has 5 tiers. We have 19 employees in level 2, 22 employees in level 3, 20 employees in level 4, 24 employees in level 5, 26 employees in level 6. So our teachers are really spread out on the schedule, which is good. And then as you get up to the grandfathered, you'll see those number of employees will drop because those are usually our people that are retiring. So you'll see in 17, 18, we had 10 employees, and now we have 7 in the grandfathered. So what we saw was happening with our model, or what we thought would happen, that is happening. Our employees are moving up. We have employees really spread out on there. You know, we felt that the model is working with professional development. We also talked about, we looked at some surveys that, if you want to go back to that, Brady, we looked at the surveys for the team leaders, instructional coaches, and mentors. Those were surveys from last spring, but we just brought up the results and showed the committee and talked about that. We also had Julie show us the professional development, what teachers are doing to get their professional development. We saw a wide range of things that they are doing to get their PD points, and a lot of people on board doing their PD points right now. One of the requests that did come to the compensation committee was the Battle of the Books. They are looking to add 2 advisors to a Class E on the Appendix G schedule. Battle of the Books has been going on forever. I have kids that are 21, and when they were in 4th and 5th grade, they were in the Battle of the Books, so this is still going on today. Mrs. Garvey, our reading coordinator, says there are between 50 and 75 4th graders who participate in Battle of the Books, and she says it is an activity that goes on for 10 to 19 weeks. She says the Wisconsin School of Technology publishes around 20 titles, and they publish them in May. And these teachers will look to pick these titles, and they'll get kids starting to set up who want to be into the Battle of the Books, and they will read for the summer, hopefully. And then in October, they'll get their groups together. There is a trivia contest that is held in the first week of February. It is a statewide trivia contest. She said that that trivia contest can be done on the computer, so they are not leaving the district. And you know, she's looking for 2 advisors to be in Appendix E.
And these would not happen until next year, correct?
This would happen for the 2019-20 school year.
So we can budget for it if the board approves it.
We would post the position, and if it's approved, and we would get 2 advisors to lead this. The committee thought it was, you know,
So
a good activity.
We would need a motion to support Battle of the Books being added to Appendix G, classification E, and I think that's what, around $970.
It is $927.64.
Was one of the
per
advantages of
advisor.
that committee is that they could all sit and discuss the number of hours that other similar activities have. They took a look at this, and there was a fair amount of discussion. And ultimately, I think, again, this is where they said, based on the hours, this is where we would recommend it be placed.
I would so move.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mike and a